Welcome to today's game. This is the second one in our Crisis in May 1815 campaign, and this is the defence of Charleroi. So what we're looking at here is a representation of the small town of Charleroi and the Sambre, I think it is, the river that Charleroi is on the banks of. Here we can see the main crossing into Charleroi and the Prussian forces that are defending the Charleroi village against the advancing forces of the Army du Nord. However, following the orders of Napoleon, the half of his attacking corps has swung to the left, to the west, and outflanked the Charleroi line, crossed the river near Soire, and the village of Soire, rather, and is attacking Charleroi from directly from the west rather than the south. So let's have a look at the defending Prussian forces first, and then we'll look at the forces the French are initially throwing into this. So we have the Prussian 2nd Brigade on the table to start the game. So we have the 6th Regiment here. These are line troops. There's a unit of musketeers lining the river next to the bridge. We've got a foot artillery battery masking the bridge itself, and another musketeer battalion. These are supported by a battalion of fusiliers. They're veterans who are garrisoning this part of Charleroi. Now this river here is uncrossable to artillery or cavalry except at the bridge, but can be forded by infantry as difficult terrain. We're playing it as today. Then in response to the threat from the right flank, the 28th Reserve Regiment has been deployed. These are uniformed as Berg infantry, and apologies, they still have their French flags, because I've got to have a unit with flags on. I can't take all those flag units out, even if, as we know, when they were fighting for the Prussians, we believe they didn't have any standards. So we've got two battalions of Berg, one lining the river and one garrisoning this part of the village or town of Charleroi. Then, because of the outflanking threat, the Prussians have deployed their Westphalian Landwehr regiment on the bordering this stream that goes to the north of Charleroi to face off against the French threat that's trying to outflank. The Prussians also have a unit of Landwehr Lancers attached to this brigade. They are just arriving from off table and will appear on this road here at the start of the first turn. Alright, so what threat are they facing? So over here we can see we've got the attacking French force. We have a brigade of 3 battalions and a brigade of 5 battalions. These are all line infantry, supported by a core artillery battery of 12-pounders with their skirmish screens in place. They also have an 8-pounder battery off table that will move on once the infantry have moved forward. Then we've got the large outflanking manoeuvre. So over here we have another French division. I think this is the 3rd division, also of 8 battalions. Got a brigade of 4, another brigade of 4. They need to have their skirmishers deployed. No, we do have part of the skirmisher screen deployed here. We've got more skirmishers to deploy, and then they have their divisional artillery battery providing support. In addition, available to the French, we have 2 further divisions that are following up, and a cuirassier brigade available as well, and that was dispatched with this flanking force. So we'll see how the French do as they try and seize this position and gain an advantage and capture the village of Charleroi and open the road to the north. Right, we'll crack on with the first turn. Okay, so we've rolled for activations. We tried to put artillery assault on French heavy battery here to start suppressing the defences along this tougher waterline, but made no progress. We went hesitant with this brigade. The brigade to the French left here has gone active, so it will be able to move forward. For the Prussians, they did get artillery assault in place for their battery in the centre here, and otherwise all Prussian brigades activated. And for the French on the right-hand side of the Prussian position, we do have infantry assault in place for the first of their 2 attacking brigades, and indeed both brigades on this side are active. So we have a -1 adjustment for initiative. Let's see what we get. French get a 7, Prussians get an 11, so the Prussians have initiative on turn 1. All right, starting with the movement on the right flank, we've moved the Prussians moved their first Landwehr battalion a little bit to the right to make sure it couldn't be flanked, and the supporting battalion has moved to the right also to continue to provide an effective line of fire against this river position. The 3rd battalion has about faced or turned 90 degrees to the right to form up in march column to provide some rear support here, as we don't see any threat at the moment coming from this part of the table. The Berg infantry remain deployed, and we've moved the Berg skirmishers across to plug that gap to a minor extent. For the French, the brigade on infantry assault has moved forward at full speed, and their skirmishers have moved up against the river line. Expect them to open fire against the Landwehr this turn, and the 2nd skirmisher screen is approaching the river, and the 2nd brigade is moving out. Then as we move across, as promised, the Landwehr lancers have arrived on the table for deployment next turn. Otherwise, the rest of the Prussian forces on this side of the river remain unmoved. The French brigade in the corner here have taken the opportunity of advancing forward, and their skirmish screen has potentially got the Prussian guns in range, but this battery and this regiment is static, as are the skirmishers, because they didn't get because they're indeed hesitant. All right, firing first. We'll start with the Prussians. We'll start from the right flank. Let's see if we've got anything to do. Okay, so we'll start with an inferior volley from the Landwehr battalion. They'll count as reservists, this being the 1815 campaign, so they're slightly better quality at Landwehr by this level of experience, but it will be an inferior volley as they moved, and it'll be an inferior volley at -2 because they're firing at skirmishers. But wow, we've rolled a double 12, so that'll be a discipline test on the skirmishers, and for an inferior volley that goes down to a 10. That is 3 casualties, so that's loss of 1 skirmisher stand, and we'll also have a destiny test. Let's see what the destiny test result is. Probably won't be too much at this stage in the game. It's an 11. So a destiny test as an 11 will be a falter test on that French brigade. All right, that seems a bit unlucky, but let's see how they recover from that. We'll take off that skirmisher stand, and now we'll do the discipline test on the skirmishers. They're an 11, so the skirmishers are fine. All right, we'll repeat the shots. We'll check the range here, actually. I think the 2nd Landwehr battalion may not have a target in range. Right, so moving to the left-hand flank of the Prussian position, we're going to open fire with the guns. They have artillery assault. They are going to fire at that skirmish screen because they could cause a lot of damage to our guns, and otherwise this is a pretty good position. So let's see what we roll. That's not great. That couldn't be a worse roll. A 4, that's a 2, so that'll just be a discipline casualty. So a terrible start for the Prussian guns. All right, and then and that's artillery assault. So on a 2, that's not a natural double 1, so they don't, I believe, go on low on ammunition, but they may take 2 casualties from the fatigue result. I will just check that. And then finally we'll fire our skirmish screen. We've got 5 in the Prussian skirmish screen. That will be 4 casualty dice. We lose 1 for firing at skirmishers. So 3 shots for the Prussian skirmisher screen, and we will cause 1 casualty against the French skirmishers. Right, we'll just mark that. All right, so return fire from the French. So this battery of 12-pounders are going to open up against these musketeers on the other side of the river. The musketeers will be in cover. Let's see what the French get. They roll a 7. That goes down to a 6. This is at effective range. That's 1 casualty on the musketeers. Okay, and then we're going to open up with the French skirmishers. We've got 4 bases there. 4 bases is 3 casualty dice. That goes down to 2 because we're firing at skirmishers. And we cause no casualties against the Prussian skirmishers. Then this French skirmish screen, which has got 5 bases in it, is going to open fire against the Prussian guns. So 5 bases is 4 dice, but the guns are in cover. So that'll be 3 dice for the skirmishers, and they cause 2 more casualties against the Prussian guns. So these guns in one turn have been dealt a major blow. They're on 4 casualties. That's not far off being destroyed, and they will no longer be able to do artillery assault, because once you've taken 4 casualties, you can't undertake that enhanced rate of fire. So good success from the French, from their skirmishers and their artillery on that flank. Alright, we'll now open fire on this flank. French skirmisher screen will fire at the Landwehr. Again, this will be 3 bases, because they took the casualties this turn. So 3 bases is 3 dice. They lose 1 because they're firing at the Landwehr in cover. A 5 and a 6, pretty good going. So 2 casualties on the Landwehr. Okay, mark that up. And then the other French skirmisher screen, I think it'll be in range. Musketeers only have a 9-inch range, but those skirmishers have a 12. So again, 2 dice against this battalion, a 3 and a 3, so no casualties there. And then the French artillery battery will also up and up at this battalion at long range in cover, and we roll a 7. Long range is it goes down to a 6. It's half a casualty on the Landwehr, and that does not convert. So there we go. There we are at the end of the first turn. So French moving up aggressively with infantry assaults in place, and they've caused a couple of casualties against this Landwehr screen, but they've done a pretty devastating first volley against the French skirmishers, so they're certainly up for a fight. As we move across against the centre, the Prussians got some options to possibly thin out their attack here, but noting that the French do have further reinforcements, so they could come up that flank and try and get into Charleroi up this road and over across on this far flank. The French assault just started to come in, but we have done some good casualties against the Prussian guns. But there we go, that's the end of turn 1. We'll move on to turn 2. Just for information for command dice for the French, we're rolling 2 lots of 2. We've got 2 brigades on this flank and 2 brigades on this flank, and as the commanders are operating in isolation of one another, we're saying we can't share ADCs across the 2 sets of French commands. Alright, let's do ADCs and activation for turn 2. Alright, so mixed results on activation. So we've activated our 12-pounder battery and that brigade on the hill, but unfortunately our brigade over here, despite having a reroll, failed to activate. So it looks like it'll just be an exchange of skirmisher fire with the Prussian artillery battery on this flank. Over here, far more serious stuff for the French. We only got 1 ADC, which we've had to allocate to our faltering brigade. The other brigade was active, and all the Prussian brigades are active. So let's see what we do as we do the falter test on this French brigade. So let's roll for activation. There's their ADC dice. Let's see what they get. They get a 4 for a faltering brigade. Is a rally. So they go hesitant, but they don't retreat off the table. And do they have to pull back if they're rallying? Within 9 inches of formed enemy. So none of our formed units are within 9 inches of formed enemy, so no retiring necessary. But we do have 2 hesitant French brigades and no hesitant Prussian brigades. So that'll be -2 on the French for initiative, and again the Prussians get initiative for turn 2. Okay, so not too much moving on the left flank over here. So the French skirmish screens moved forward somewhat, and those 2 battalions that were on the hill started moving forward on either side of the gun battery, and the 3rd battalion has moved up to stay, or at least stay close to providing support. This brigade was hesitant, so no movements over here, and the Prussian positions on this side of the village remain unchanged. We still have the Berg garrisoning this right-hand side of the village. We've started dispatching our Landwehr Lancers to support our right, and the Landwehr battalion has moved, or continues to move, into its position to reinforce the Landwehr holding the river at this point. The French, both brigades, are now moving into jump-off positions, and skirmishers will start exchanging fire again with the Landwehr. But as last turn, Prussians to open fire first. I think it'll be 2 volleys from the Landwehr. Can they repeat their performance of last turn and do some devastating volleys against these skirmishers? So it'll be -2 for firing at the skirmishers, and we'll fire the right-hand Landwehr battalion first. Okay, so they roll an 8. This will be a standard volley because they're recruits. That goes down to a 6. So that's 1 casualty on the skirmish screen in front of them. And then the second battalion will open fire. They roll a 5, that will go down to a 3. So that'll be a loss of fire discipline to these Landwehr. Alright, let's mark the skirmishers up and we'll do the rest of the Prussian firing. Alright, so the Prussian skirmishers have done nothing. Their artillery battery is going to open fire against this battalion advancing off the hill. This will be at effective range -1 because we've taken 4 casualties. We roll a 7 at effective range. There will be a combat dice because we're firing at a column at effective range, which doesn't cause any casualties. So a 7 at effective range becomes a 6 because of our cumulative casualties. That's 1 casualty on that French column. That's the end of the Prussian firing on this flank. Now for some French return fire on over, starting on the left. Alright, so the French guns will again open fire at this battalion behind the river line. It'll be at -1, and then a shot of at effective range, that'll be 1 casualty. So this battalion moves up to 2 casualties. Then those French skirmishers have fired, had no effect against the Prussian skirmisher screen. We'll now fire this base of skirmishers, so 5 bases, that's 4 dice, losing 1 because we're firing at the guns in cover. Do well again, that's another casualty on the guns, they're up to 5 casualties. And that's it for French firing this turn, I think. Yep, no more French firing, all the Prussian firing's done. There are no melees, so that's the end of turn 2. So we've done orders for the French. Both brigades on this flank are active, but we only had 1 ADC, so no chance to deploy an extra infantry assault. We did have 2 ADCs on this flank, so we tried to put infantry assault on the far brigade. That failed to go off, so that brigade's gone hesitant. The one on the hill here is active. For the Prussians, the Berg and the regulars are unfortunately both hesitant, but the Landwehr are active and can continue to deploy. Let's roll. This will be a -1 for the Prussians net, and the Prussians get a 6, a 9, the French get a 6, so even reduced to an 8. The Prussians retain initiative for the 3rd turn, and they get to charge and move first in turn 3. No movement from the Prussians on this flank, happy with their defensive position. The French have now masked their guns as this brigade fully moves down the hill, ready to potentially assault across the river if it can get the infantry assault orders off. Over here the brigade remains hesitant, unable to advance further, but its skirmishers can still continue to fire at the Prussian artillery battery. As we move across, I realise I hadn't taken the skirmisher fire for the French, so we did cause another casualty on the Landwehr on the left and another casualty on the Landwehr on the right from the French skirmisher screens, but unfortunately the French artillery battery on the hill rolled a 3, and firing at enemies in cover, that becomes 2, so they go low on ammunition. Right, that's it for movement. Now it'll be firing the Prussians to open fire first. We'll start with the right. Again, left-hand French Landwehr battalion. The skirmishers are the only units in range. This will be a shot at -2, a 6 goes down to a 4. That'll be a loss of fire discipline again. And this battalion on 3 casualties, so no adjustments yet. Again firing at the skirmishers. We've rolled a 3, so that'll be a loss of fire discipline. So both units of Prussian Landwehr lose fire discipline, trying to engage those skirmishers. clearly proving very annoying across the other side of the river. On the left flank, the Prussian skirmisher fire again proved ineffective against the French skirmishers. Prussian guns are going to fire at this battery. It's now going to get the benefit of soft cover as it's now down in the valley, and the hedges and trees lining the river will help it. So this will be at effective range, so there will be a combat dice, because again we're firing at a column. Nothing from the combat dice. We roll a 7, that goes down to a 6 at effective range. There'll be another casualty on this battalion, takes them up to 2 from the Prussian gunfire. Alright, let's do the French fire. So unfortunately for the French, their heavy artillery battery is masked, so no effect from that. The French skirmishers will open up. They've got 4 bases, that'll be 3 combat dice down to 2 because they're firing at skirmishers. They don't cause any impact. And then the French skirmish screen will again fire at the guns. That will be normally 4 dice, reduced to 3 because they're firing at the guns. In cover, we cause another casualty on the guns. These guns are going to potentially have to pull out now. That's 6 casualties on the guns, mainly from the French skirmishers. Alright, and there's no real way for the Prussians to drive them off, so I think we're going to have to pull that gun crew out. Alright, now return fire over here by the French. Again, it'll be their skirmishers opening up. We have 4 and 3 in the skirmish screens, so that's 3 dice. That'll be 2 shots against the right-hand battalion. That's 1 more casualty. 2 shots against the left-hand battalion. 1 more casualty. The French skirmishers are really proving effective, and these Landwehr are nearly at the point, or are at the point now, of dropping from reservists down to conscript status, which will certainly help the French assault. Right, that's it for the end of turn 3. That's the end of firing. Let's move on with activations for turn 4. Unfortunately for the French, both brigades are inactive. We did get 2 ADCs. I tried to put infantry assault on, failed on that, and then failed on the other activation roll. So it looks like it's just continued skirmish exchange on this flank, but it's not doing the French too much harm. So we'll see whether we can do a manoeuvre rather than advance with our formations over here to allow our artillery battery to reopen fire. Over here, both French brigades are active. We could start assaulting across the river, and for the Prussians, all 3 brigades are active for them. So this will be a -2 roll for initiative. For the French, the Prussians, for the 4th turn in a row, keep the initiative. They get to charge and move first. Alright, turn 4, so the French have deployed their rearmost battalion into line here. That'll unmask the guns, allow them to open fire again against the Prussians in the village. There's now a gap in the Prussian lines as the Prussians have decided to do an emergency limber and pull their foot artillery battery out of the combat. It had taken 6 casualties. That'll be up to 7 for the emergency limber. So only 1 more casualty and it would be gone, and it could well have taken 2 casualties from that skirmish screen this turn. The 2 Prussian battalions have started to close up to defend the river crossing if the French ever got moving on this flank. We've deployed the Burgher infantry battalion into column for potential redeployment, not deciding whether we need to reinforce this flank or potentially just pull back out of Charleroi, as there's a real risk we're going to get surrounded. Over on this flank we have deployed our 3rd Landwehr battalion as a reserve, and the Landwehr Lancers are in position, so there may be an ability to push back this French assault that's going in on the flank here. As you can see, the French are all up against the river line now, and their skirmishers have crossed into the stream. Let's see how firing plays out. Prussians are to fire first in turn 4. Okay, so these will be inferior volleys because of the number of casualties taken by the right-hand battalion. Let's see what we get. We get a 9. That it'll be an 8 because a 7 because we're firing at skirmishers. Inferior volley is 1 more casualty on the skirmisher screen. That does not result in the loss of a base. Alright, this will be a standard volley as this Landwehr battalion has only taken 3 casualties. Roll a 6, that goes down to a 4. That will be a loss of fire discipline. So we can take the fire discipline off the right-hand battalion, but the left-hand battalion continues to be subject to this harassing fire from the skirmishers and is just blazing away in return. Alright, so that's Prussian firing on this flank. So we move across to the left-hand flank. Got the Prussian skirmishers, so it'll be normally 4 dice, 3 because the French are in cover. That will be the loss of a base. but the screen remains intact for the French. Alright, that's Prussian skirmishers fired, no Prussian artillery to fire, and no other targets for the Prussians on this flank. So it'll be a chance for the French to return fire. So three stands is 3 bases, it'll be 2 to fire at the Prussian skirmishers. We cause 1 casualty against the Prussian skirmishers, and that's probably it. We'll just check whether the other skirmishers are in range for the French. So this is the end of turn 4. Let's see how the Prussians are feeling. They are worried, I think, that they're going to get encircled. So this French brigade is now down and pretty much at the river line, and the Prussians know they have nothing guarding this flank. So if it were to come over the river, there's nothing to hold them off there. We do have another battalion, but it is guarding the village itself. We've lost our artillery battery that was holding the centre of our position, but we've been helped by the fact that the French continue to be hesitant on this flank. We've formed up the Berg, potentially to redeploy and reinforce our right flank, and looks like we're hitting crisis moment here. Can the Prussians hold off this upcoming French assault on their right? All right, let's see what happens in turn 5. The observant of you will have noticed that was for turn 5. Let's see what happens, I think, in turn 6. All right, in turn 6, not enough ADCs for either side to place any special orders, but all 7 brigades on the table are active, so this is a straight roll-off. The French roll a 9, they do their best yet, but the Prussians roll an 11. 6 turns in a row. The Prussians retain initiative. Let's see what they're going to do. I don't imagine there'll be any Prussian charges, but there might be some French ones. Alright, so the first thing to happen in turn 6 is the French have come steaming over the river here. 2 battalions attacking, 2 battalions in support, infantry assault orders in place. They've both taken the extra casualty for going at full pelt across that difficult terrain. There'll be a defensive volley by the land there. Let's see how they do as they fire against this assault. Alright, so the volley will be at -2, -1 because of the 4 casualties, -1 because of the cover, and it'll be an inferior volley as we're conscript. So an inferior volley of an 8 goes down to a 6. That is 1 casualty on one of the attacking French columns, which won't cause any adjustments to the combat result. Alright, let's see what the combat result will be, charge result will be. Alright, so the Prussians will get the advantage of 2 supports, a flank support and a rear support. The French will get 2 attacking battalions, and both of those attacking battalions will get a re-roll. They will also be at +2, and they can take the best assault as there are 2 assaults going in, and it's not closed columns because there's more than a 3-inch gap between them. Alright, let's roll the Prussians first. Well, that's pretty good. We get a 10, so I don't think we're going to go for any re-rolls on that. So let's see what the French do. So the first assault is an 8. Now, are we going to re-roll? We've got a re-roll for support. We'll re-roll a 3. It's cocked. We'll re-roll a 3. That's an 11. That's pretty good. And let's roll for the other battalion. They get an 8 as well. They get a re-roll 2. They get a 9. So we'll take the +2 modifier on the 11. That goes up to a 13 against a 10. So the French win by 3. They will take the ground, and the French and the Prussians have to retreat and take 1d3 casualties, and that will unform the battalion that's behind them, and I think their supporting battalion will also have to retire. Right at the end of the charge phase, quite a lot's happened. So the Even though we don't have infantry assault, you can charge with 1 battalion. So this brigade decided to charge the skirmish screen, which passed its morale test, fell back before it, but the French are now starting to outflank on this flank, potentially isolate the village or the town of Charleroi. The other brigades are now all moving up. We've stopped putting infantry assault on and are just rolling the French assault forward here. The guns are also clearly free to fire. And over here, dramatic results, as you saw. The French crashed through the trees and crashed into those Landwehr battalions, and without Charlie commanding them, they were far more fragile and vulnerable than his command usually implies. So the leading battalion had to retreat 18 inches, which took it off table. Its 2 supports also have to retire. I think the retire move is it 12 inches or 18 inches for infantry? Its retire is 12 inches, but that also took one of the battalions off the table. So we decided honour was the better part of valour, so the whole Landwehr brigade has retired off the table back towards its lines of communication rather than risk being isolated. And unfortunately, as they were fleeing off the table, they unformed the Landwehr cavalry, our potential counterattack force. They were too close at hand. All right, we'll now do the rest of the normal movement. So having completed the movement phase, we've got French force deployed here, ready to exploit and potentially push back these Landwehr lancers. 2 more battalions ready to advance over the river, some skirmishers in the river itself, and some flanking battalions that are looking to exploit this gap in the Prussian lines, potentially go into the undefended sides of Charleroi. The garrison of Charleroi started to potentially withdraw from its exposed position right in the north of the, or in the south actually, remember my geography, right in the far south of the village. And the French, as I say, are moving up to continue to put pressure on and potentially isolate the Charleroi garrison. I think it's time for the Prussians to try and withdraw. We need to keep this force intact for the campaign. All right, let's move on to turn 8. Can we conduct the necessary fighting withdrawal we need? The guns have gone. Can the infantry follow? All right, so yet again, the Prussians have initiative. They rolled a 9. What can they do to try and retrieve this position? Let's see what they do and see if there are any French charges this turn. All right, so somewhat prematurely, perhaps the French have decided victory is theirs, and they have charged an infantry battalion across the bridge. Let's see how we do. We got a couple of defensive volleys by the Prussians. Can they throw them back? Let's start with the green flag battalion. These are actually the supporting battalion. This will be a regular volley. We roll a 5. Not too great for a standard volley, is 1 casualty on the attacking French battalion. It takes them up to 3. And then this second battalion fires. This will be at -1. It should be at -2 because they've still got cover. In fact, the other one should have been a 4 for a standard volley, which is a loss of fire discipline. So that will be no casualty. But the second volley, better. We've rolled a 10, -2. That goes down to an 8. So that is 3 casualties on the attacking French battalion, which takes them up to 5. So that'll be quite a serious modifier on their charge results. So they've got -1 for unit casualties, and they took 3 in the charge, so that's -3 on their assault. And the Prussians do get a reroll as well. See how we do. French roll a 7, Prussians roll a 9. They won't do the reroll because the 7 drops to a 4, so that's a -5. That feels good enough. The attacker retires and the defenders stand, so that premature charge by the French does not go home. Okay, so the Prussian retreat is rapidly turning into a rout. So what we've seen happen this turn is the Berg infantry form up into march column to try and escape through the village. The Berg infantry that were the garrison have broken out of the garrison with a view to moving up down this road. The Fusiliers have moved to the corner of Charleroi with a view to moving off the road this turn. The French have continued to advance, driving back the Prussian skirmisher line here, and taken a couple more casualties, but nothing too significant. The French continue to advance to the river line over here. They've got no opposition ahead of them, so they'll be able to push across. They've caused a couple of casualties on this battalion, and we just rolled a double 6 on the Prussians in the village here. That caused 3 casualties, which has taken them up to 9, and a discipline test. They rolled a 5 with a -2 adjustment, goes down to a 3, so that's a retreat, and they take D3 extra casualties, so they're on to 11, not quite destroyed, but they also have to retreat. The Prussian army is disintegrating as we watch. All right, turn 10. This will be the last turn of the game. I think the French have 1 initiative, so they'll be able to continue their advance up here. There's just a question of whether we charge with any battalions from this brigade here. Unfortunately for the French, that brigade and the flanking brigade down there that were holding the centre have both gone hesitant, so they won't be able to push the Prussians out of Charleroi anymore, apart from possibly 1 charge against this battalion, which simply maybe against the skirmishers because nothing else really is in range. That'll be it, and I think these Prussian forces will be deemed able to exit off the table. All right, let's do those final moves and we'll come back with some closing shots. Okay, so this is the way the game ends. The Prussians doing a hasty retreat out of Charleroi. They've deployed their fusiliers from this part of Charleroi village into a hastily formed or unformed line to try and see off this French battalion, which should just give enough time for the second of the 2 Berg battalions and the other musketeer battalion to move back and retreat down this road. At the same time, the French forces are approaching from the right flank, and the rest of the village is about to fall as the French can simply march across the river as the village town is now undefended. Second victory of the campaign, but we did have 4 French divisions against 1 Prussian division equivalent in the village, but the French did well. Their flanking manoeuvre worked, and the Landwehr Brigade were the critical failure in the defence, not fighting nearly as well as they do under Charlie's command, breaking under the French assault, which unhinged the position. And then all the hesitant results over here probably worked in favour of the French. So combined firepower of their skirmishers drove off the Prussian artillery battery, and then musketry and skirmish fire broke the line battalions that were on this flank. If we'd gone straight into assault, we might well have suffered further losses. All right, I hope you enjoyed the game, game 2 of the campaign. Let's see where we go from here. Cheers everyone, and see you again next time.